It was supposed to be the perfect anniversary trip. The sea, the sun, 5 years of love. But one night, one cocktail, and one secret changed everything. It was our 5th summer together. 5 years of marriage. Not too long, not too short. Long enough to weather the first storms of everyday life, yet still believe in romance. As we packed our suitcases, I smiled to myself. How symbolic. Once again the sea, once again July, once again just the two of us. It felt as though this was how it was always meant to be. Every year returning to the shore, to the sound of the waves, to the hot sun melting the pavement and the promise of cold white wine in a glass that sweats against your fingertips. The trip began perfectly. At the airport, we held hands like teenagers in love. He teased me for packing too many dresses, and I fired back that it didn't matter. Every single one was for him anyway. At the check-in desk, he leaned down and kissed my shoulder, whispering, 5 years, and you're still the only person I want to sit next to on a plane. I laughed, resting my head briefly against his chest, and for that moment I felt safe, certain, anchored. The flight itself was uneventful, except for the way I kept sneaking glances at him while he dozed with his headphones in. His face looked younger in sleep, more open, softer than the man who sometimes came home tired, distracted, caught up in work emails. On vacation, he belonged entirely to me. No deadlines, no late calls, no excuses. Just him, just us. When we landed, the humid coastal air wrapped around us like a blanket. Palm trees lined the road to the resort, their fronds swaying lazily in the evening breeze. I opened the car window and let the salt wind whip my hair into tangles, laughing when he reached over to smooth it back with mock annoyance. "You'll arrive looking like a hurricane," he teased, and I thought, let it be so, if he's the one who always calms the storm. The resort itself seemed like a postcard. Whitewashed walls glowing in the sunset, bougainvillea spilling over balconies, and the endless blue of the sea stretching beyond the horizon. We checked in, and when the receptionist handed me a glass of chilled Prosecco, I thought, this is happiness. Simple, tangible, here and now. Later, when we reached our room, I stepped out onto the balcony. Below, the pool shimmered in turquoise light, and further still, the waves rolled in steady, ancient rhythm. He came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist, resting his chin on my shoulder. "To us," he murmured, and I lifted my glass. "To us," I echoed, believing it. The first morning set the tone. I awoke to the scent of coffee, real Italian espresso, rich and dark, and he had already gone down to the cafe, bought 2 pastries, and arranged them on the little table on the balcony. "Breakfast with a view," he said, grinning as if he'd invented the idea himself. We ate slowly, watching the sun climb higher, painting the sea in bands of silver and blue. I couldn't remember the last time we had lingered like this, without one of us rushing off to work or checking our phones. Here, time stretched, soft and indulgent. In the afternoons, we swam in the pool, lay side by side on striped loungers, shared cocktails in tall, sweating glasses. I loved the way he made me laugh, the way he still looked at me like I was the only woman in the world. Sometimes, when he thought I wasn't watching, I caught him just staring, a small smile on his lips. And in those moments, my heart swelled. I thought, we made it. We really made it. Evenings were for rituals. We dressed up, me in one of those many dresses he'd teased me for packing, him in a crisp shirt that smelled faintly of the cologne I loved. We would wander into town, choose a restaurant at random, and linger over seafood and wine until the candles burned low. He always ordered dessert, always insisted I have the first bite. "It tastes sweeter when you try it first," he joked.
It was silly, but it made me feel cherished. That night, back at the hotel, I curled against him and whispered, "Happy anniversary." He kissed my hair and replied, "To many more." I drifted off to sleep with the taste of wine still on my lips and the certainty that our story was still being written, page by page, year by year. I didn't know then how fragile rituals can be, how easily they shatter.
It was on the third day that the shadows began to creep in. Small at first, barely noticeable. He took a phone call on the balcony and spoke in a low voice, turning slightly away from me. I assumed it was work. He always said he couldn't escape it entirely, even on holiday. I rolled my eyes affectionately, but something about the tightness in his shoulders lingered in my mind. Later, at the pool, I noticed him scanning the area once or twice, as if looking for someone. When I asked, he brushed it off, just people watching. And I laughed, letting it go. After all, wasn't that what everyone did on holiday? Watch strangers, invent stories for them, pass the time? That evening, we went into town for dinner. The streets buzzed with life. Children chasing each other across the square, waiters calling out menus, couples strolling arm in arm. I wore a dress the color of the sea at dusk, and when he complimented me, I believed him. Yet later, when he excused himself to take another call, I felt a flicker of unease. It lasted only a moment, quickly buried beneath laughter and wine, but still, it was there. The next morning, I woke to find him already gone from the bed. A note on the pillow read, "Went for a run, be back soon." It was nothing unusual. He often liked to start the day with exercise. But as I lay there, listening to the distant crash of waves, I felt an emptiness beside me that coffee and pastries couldn't fill. When he returned, flushed and smiling, carrying fresh fruit from the market, I pushed the unease away. He kissed my forehead and held out a peach, its skin warm from the sun. "For you," he said, and the moment melted into sweetness again. And yet, by the fourth night, the unease had grown roots. He suggested we each order different cocktails, then disappeared for nearly a half an hour after excusing himself to the bar. I sat alone at the table, swirling the melting ice in my glass, telling myself not to overthink. But when he finally returned, smiling, apologizing for the wait, I noticed the faint scent of perfume clinging to his shirt. Not mine, not familiar. I didn't mention it. I laughed at his jokes, leaned into his shoulder as we walked back to the hotel. But deep inside, a quiet voice whispered, "Something's wrong." And once that voice is heard, it's impossible to silence. The evening began like any other. The hotel bar was alive with music, soft jazz that floated above the murmur of conversation and the clink of glasses. Couples laughed at candlelit tables, waiters glided between them carrying trays of brightly colored drinks, and the warm night air smelled of citrus and salt. I felt radiant in my white dress, my skin still glowing from a day spent in the sun. He leaned across the table, smiling, and suggested, "Let's try something different tonight. Surprise cocktails. I'll order for us." I agreed, amused, watching him head toward the bar. He looked relaxed, confident, at ease. Everything I wanted to believe he was. I sipped at the water in front of me, fanning myself gently with the menu, expecting him back in just a few minutes. But minutes stretched. 5,
10, 15. The condensation from my glass formed a small ring on the tablecloth, and I traced it with my fingertip, glancing toward the bar each time a waiter passed. No sign of him. The band switched songs. The laughter around me swelled and ebbed, and still I sat, alone, my smile faltering. At 20 minutes, the first spark of irritation flared. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe the bartender was slow. Maybe he ran into someone he knew. But irritation gave way to unease. Unease to something sharper. The empty chair across from me seemed to grow heavier with each passing second. A silent accusation. Finally, I rose. My heels clicked softly against the polished floor as I crossed to the bar. The bartender, busy mixing a row of mojitos, glanced up when I asked if he'd seen my husband. A brief pause, then a nod. I think he went toward the lounge area, the man said, casually, pointing toward a side corridor draped in gauzy curtains, lit by soft golden lamps. My heart skipped. I thanked him, forcing a smile, and turned in that direction. The corridor felt longer than it was, each step echoing in my chest. The laughter and music faded behind me, replaced by the low hum of voices, the clatter of ice in glasses, the faint perfume of jasmine. I walked slowly, telling myself I'd find him checking his phone, maybe chatting with another guest. Something ordinary, something harmless. But beneath that, a knot of dread coiled tighter. I pushed aside the curtain to the lounge. And there, in the half-light, I saw him. Not alone. He was leaning close to a young woman, her dark hair glossy under the golden lamps, her lips full and painted, and her body pressed against his in a way that was unmistakably intimate. His arm rested around her shoulders as if it belonged there, as if it had always belonged there. The girl laughed at something he whispered, tilting her head back, and in that instant, the world tilted with her. My breath caught in my throat. The scene froze. Each detail seared into my mind. The glint of the girl's jewelry, the careless curl of his fingers against her skin. The sharp pang in my chest, as if the air itself had betrayed me. And I understood. This was no accident. No mistake. This was the truth.
Time didn't just slow, it splintered. The sound of clinking glasses faded into a dull echo. The music from the bar outside became a faraway hum. All I could hear was the pounding of my own heart, heavy and uneven, as if it too had lost its rhythm. My knees trembled. For a terrifying second, I thought they might give out completely. The stem of my empty glass slipped slightly in my hand, slick with condensation, and I tightened my grip until my knuckles whitened. Every nerve in my body screamed at once: fight, flee, collapse. My eyes locked on the curve of his hand. The hand that had held mine on the plane, smoothed my hair in the car, raised a glass in a toast on our balcony. Now it rested so naturally against the bare skin of another woman's shoulder. I felt the memory of his touch burn against me,
as though I'd been branded by a lie I hadn't seen coming. My breath came shallow, ragged. I could taste salt, not from the sea, but from the tears I refused to let fall. Around me, the lounge blurred, colors smearing together, the soft gold of the lamps, the crimson of the girl's lipstick, the white of his shirt. Only their two figures remained sharp, cutting against the haze, cruel in their clarity. The girl shifted, laughing again, her voice like glass shattering. And he smiled, that same smile he used when I wore a new dress, when he caught me staring at him across a dinner table, a private smile, a mine smile. Except it wasn't mine at all. My stomach twisted. I felt suddenly cold, though the room was warm, though sweat traced down my back. The world had turned upside down, and I stood at the edge of it, barely holding on. 1,000 images flashed through my mind. Our wedding day, his hand trembling as he slid the ring onto my finger, our tiny apartment where we'd eaten pasta off chipped plates, the anniversaries before this one, full of laughter and promises. Every memory now cracked, fractured, poisoned by the sight before me. I wanted to scream, to storm into the room, drag him away, demand answers, demand why. But my body betrayed me. Frozen, rooted in place, silent witness to the moment my marriage broke. I pressed my hand to my chest, as if to hold the pieces of myself together, as if to stop them from falling apart onto the marble floor. And still, I watched, unable to look away. This was the moment everything shattered, not with a crash, but with a whisper, a smile, a touch that wasn't mine. The seconds stretched into eternity. My body stood rooted to the spot, but inside, a storm raged. Fury, grief, disbelief, emotions collided, tearing through me with a violence I couldn't contain. My throat burned with the words I wanted to scream, words that clawed at my chest, demanding to be let out. How could you? Why? Who is she? Why am I not enough? But no sound came. My voice drowned beneath the tide of my own humiliation. The betrayal wasn't just in the act. It was in the ease, the comfort with which he held the other woman, as if it were natural, as if this wasn't the first time. That thought struck me harder than anything. How many moments like this had there been? How many lies had I swallowed without knowing? I felt my skin prickle, heat rising up my neck, the kind of burn that comes before tears. But I refused to cry. Not here. Not in front of them. If I fell apart now, I feared I would never piece myself back together. My heart screamed at me to act, to march into the lounge, to tear his arm away, to look him in the eye and force the truth out of him. But my legs wouldn't move. They betrayed me as much as he had, heavy and unwilling, locking me in place. I hated myself for it, hated the paralysis, the silence, the way I watched them like some ghost hovering at the edge of my own life. Anger bloomed, sharp and hot, pushing against the ache in my chest. Anger at him, at her, at myself. I thought of the morning coffee he brought to the balcony, of the peach he'd handed me with a smile, of the whispered toasts, all poisoned now, all false. How easily he had lived two lives, one with me, one with the girl now pressed against him. How effortlessly he had deceived me. I dug my nails into my palm, pain anchoring me, keeping me from collapsing. A single thought repeated in my mind like a drumbeat. I deserve better. I deserve better. Yet the sight before me insisted otherwise, mocked me with its cruel intimacy. He hadn't stumbled into temptation. He had chosen it, chosen her. And in that choice, he had broken something I knew could never be repaired. I don't remember deciding to move. My feet carried me forward on their own, as though some invisible force dragged me into the light of that room. My hands trembled at my sides, fists curling and uncurling, the pulse in my ears louder than the music, louder than the laughter. I wanted to vanish, yet some part of me needed him to see me, needed him to know that I knew. He felt me before he saw me. I swear he did. His smile faltered mid-laugh, his shoulders stiffened, and then his eyes found mine across the room. In that single glance, everything broke again. His face drained of color, his lips parted as if to form my name, but no sound came. The woman at his side followed his gaze, turning to look at me, and her smirk was a dagger, smug, careless, as though she'd won a prize she never earned. I stood there, exposed, my heart torn open for both of them to see. My throat burned with words I couldn't form, questions I couldn't ask. Rage clawed inside me, but my voice betrayed me, stuck somewhere between my lungs and my lips. So I let my eyes speak. I poured every ounce of pain, betrayal, and disbelief into that stare. I wanted him to drown in it, to feel the weight of what he had done. He looked away first. Coward. A sob clawed its way up, but I swallowed it down, my chest aching with the effort. I refused to give them my tears. Not here. Not in front of them. If I fell apart now, I feared I would never piece myself back together. But standing there, in the suffocating silence of his guilt, I understood. Some betrayals don't need words. His eyes had confessed enough. And my silence, heavy and cutting, was my only weapon left.
The silence inside me didn't just burn, it roared. It clawed at my ribs, pressed against my throat, demanded to be released. My body shook as if I were holding back a scream large enough to shatter the glass walls around us. Do something. Say something. Hit him. Hit her. Break the table. Tear the whole damn room apart. The voices inside my head were merciless, all mine, all screaming at once. My chest ached from holding it in, from clenching my jaw so tightly I thought my teeth might crack. The humiliation coated my tongue with a metallic taste, sharp and bitter, as though I were bleeding from the inside. Every detail stabbed at me. The way her manicured nails traced his arm like she had the right. The tilt of her head, smug like she had claimed a trophy. The way his body leaned into hers with a familiarity that made me nauseous. Each of these images carved themselves into me, branding me with fire I couldn't extinguish. My breathing came in short, ragged bursts. The air felt too thick to swallow, heavy with perfume and smoke and betrayal. My skin was hot, burning, my temples throbbing with each violent heartbeat. I wanted to move, to lash out, to let the fire consume everything, but my body fought me, trembling, frozen, caught between fury and despair. And then the laughter. Her laughter, high-pitched, careless, spilling into the air like glass shattering. I flinched as though struck, bile rising in my throat. He smiled at her,
That same smile he had given me just hours before, when I wore a new dress for him, when he lifted his glass to toast our 5 years, that smile was mine, or so I thought. Something inside me cracked. The rage shifted, sharper now, no longer wild, but focused. My silence, the silence that felt like suffocation a moment before, began to change. It wasn't weakness anymore. It was power. A blade I hadn't realized I could wield. They thought my stillness meant defeat. They thought my silence meant I was too broken to fight. But I felt the fire harden into something else, steel. The tears burning at the corners of my eyes did not fall. I would not cry here. Not in this room. Not in front of her smug smirk. Not in front of his guilty, cowardly eyes. My pain was mine, not theirs to witness. The fire whispered through my veins. Stand tall. Don't give them your collapse. Don't let this be the last thing they see of you. And so I stood there, trembling but upright, flames licking at my ribs, fury coursing through my blood. I was scorched, yes, broken open, but I was not destroyed. Not yet. They thought they had killed me in that moment, but what neither of them knew, what even I didn't fully grasp, was that the fire in my chest was already remaking me.
I don't remember willing my body to move. My legs carried me forward, slow and deliberate, as though each step were chiseling itself into marble. The lounge blurred around me, golden light, clinking glasses, murmurs of strangers. All of it dimmed beneath the thunder of my heartbeat, so loud I thought the entire room must hear it. He looked up. Our eyes met again, and in that moment I saw everything. The guilt, the panic, the desperate calculation flickering behind his gaze. He wasn't sorry. He wasn't broken by what he had done. He was terrified that I had seen it, terrified that the truth could no longer be hidden. That realization gutted me, more than her painted lips against his ear, more than his hand draped over her like it had draped over me 1,000 nights before. Because there in his eyes, I understood. He wasn't afraid of losing me. He was afraid of losing control of the lie. The fire inside me howled. 1,000 words crowded at the back of my throat, accusations, curses, the demand for answers I already knew I'd never receive. I imagined grabbing the wine glass from the nearest table and hurling it against the wall, watching it explode into shards as my marriage had already had. I imagined storming across the room, tearing his arm from around her, screaming his name until the entire hotel knew what he was. But I did none of it. Instead, I inhaled slowly, the breath shaking as it filled me. I straightened my spine, let my shoulders fall back. In the silence, I found my weapon. In restraint, I found my revenge. Because what could wound him more than rage? What could burn him deeper than my silence? Heavy, deliberate, undeniable. Rage would have given him something to fight, an excuse, a scene to hide behind. But silence was absolute. It was judgment without appeal. I let my eyes linger on him, unblinking, pouring every ounce of betrayal and fury into that single look. Then I turned. My heels struck the marble floor like gunshots, echoing in the sudden quiet. I didn't rush. I didn't stumble. I walked slowly, each step a sentence, each step the final nail sealing the coffin of our 5 years together. I felt their eyes on my back, his burning, hers amused, but I refused to give them the satisfaction of turning around. Let him sit there with his cowardice,
with the perfume of betrayal clinging to his skin. Let her smirk fade when she realized silence was more dangerous than any fight. The corridor swallowed me. The music grew faint behind the curtains. My hands shook again, but this time I clutched them into fists, forcing the tremor into control. My heart still raged, but beneath the storm was something steadier. Clarity. I would not beg for explanations. I would not fight for scraps of dignity he had already thrown away. I would not scream just to watch him squirm. No, I would do something far crueler. I would leave him with nothing. And in that silence, I knew he would hear me louder than he had ever heard me before.
The hotel room greeted me like a crime scene. Nothing had changed, and yet everything was ruined. The bed we had shared only hours ago looked obscene now, a mockery of intimacy. The folded towels, the half-empty glasses of water on the nightstand, the curtains swaying in the breeze, every detail screamed of a life I no longer recognized. I couldn't step inside at first. My body froze at the doorway, my hand trembling on the handle. Finally, I forced myself in, and the air felt suffocating, thick with the ghost of his presence. I didn't dare sit on the bed. Instead, I went straight to the balcony. The night air slapped me, cool, salty, merciless. Below, the sea crashed against the shore in endless waves, a rhythm older and truer than any vow he had ever spoken to me. I gripped the railing until my knuckles burned, as though the iron might anchor me to the earth, while everything inside me disintegrated. And then it came. The sobs, violent, uncontrollable, tearing through my chest like knives. I doubled over, choking on them, my body heaving with the weight of grief I had held in too long. My tears spilled hot and relentless, blurring the stars above me. I let them fall, every drop carrying a broken promise, every drop an echo of what I thought we were. 5 years, I thought. 5 years I gave you. 5 years I believed in you. The memories came in waves, crueler than the sea below. His trembling hands sliding the ring onto my finger. Our first apartment, where we laughed over burnt pasta. Anniversaries, whispered promises, moments I had carved into my heart like sacred scripture. All of them ash now. Ash, scattered at my feet. But as the sobs slowed, a different sound rose. The roar of the ocean. Steady, unyielding. It filled the silence between my breaths, reminding me that the world was larger than this room, larger than him, larger than the ruin of us. Somewhere in the hollow of my chest, where the fire had burned all night, a new ember glowed. Not rage this time, not despair. Something quieter, something stronger. Clarity. I straightened slowly, wiping the salt from my cheeks with unsteady hands. My reflection in the glass door startled me. Swollen eyes, trembling lips, hair tangled from the wind. And yet behind all that, I saw someone else. Someone standing. Someone surviving. I whispered the words out loud, my voice hoarse but steady. It ends here. The sea answered with a crash, as though sealing my vow. By dawn, I was still awake. The sky blushed pink over the horizon, and the world looked untouched, indifferent to my private apocalypse. My tears had dried into salt on my skin, but the ember inside me pulsed steady, alive. When the sun rose, I rose with it, not as his wife, not as his victim, but as the woman who had walked through betrayal, burned in its fire,
and stepped out, remade. And that, I knew, was only the beginning.
The morning came mercilessly, as mornings always do. The curtains glowed faintly with the first streaks of sunlight, painting the room in pale gold. But the light felt cruel, exposing every scar of the night before. I hadn't slept. My eyes burned, swollen from tears, but my body refused to surrender to rest. I lay awake on the balcony chair, wrapped in the hotel blanket, listening to the sea grind endlessly against the shore. It was strange how the world continued as if nothing had shattered. Waves still broke, gulls still cried, the sun still rose. Only I was broken. Eventually, I forced myself up. The room looked foreign now, hostile. His side of the bed was empty, the sheets crumpled with his weight, the faint scent of his cologne still clinging to the pillow. It made me nauseous. I couldn't look at it. I moved with mechanical precision, pulling my suitcase out from the corner. Every zipper sounded too loud in the silence. My hands folded dresses that yesterday had been worn for him. Now they felt like costumes, useless fabric, lies stitched into silk. My fingers trembled, but I kept going. One dress after another, shoes, makeup bag, toiletries. Each item I packed was an act of severance, a declaration, I am leaving. Halfway through, there was a knock at the door. Gentle, hesitant. My chest tightened. I froze, suitcase open, clothes spilling like wounds. Please, his voice, low, careful, as if he knew the wrong tone would ignite me. I stared at the door, my throat dry. 1,000 words crowded in my head, but none reached my lips. Instead, silence pressed down heavy between us. The knock came again, firmer. Just open the door. 5 minutes. Please. My heart pounded. A war between fury and the desperate pull of habit. 5 years of letting that voice in. 5 years of answering when he called. But I didn't move. My fingers tightened around the zipper of my suitcase, pulling it closed in one hard motion. No, I whispered. Not loud enough for him to hear, only for me. But the word tasted powerful, solid. I stayed still until his footsteps finally retreated down the hall. Only then did I release the breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My hands shook, my knees nearly buckled, but I refused to collapse. By the time the sun had fully risen, my bags were packed. I glanced around the room one last time. The bed, the balcony, the glasses still half filled with melted ice, all pieces of a scene that no longer belonged to me. I closed the door behind me without looking back. The click of the lock echoed like the end of a chapter. The taxi ride to the airport felt like a dream I couldn't wake up from. The driver hummed softly to a radio station, the upbeat melody clashing violently with the silence pressing against my chest. Outside the window, the coastline stretched, sparkling and alive, as though mocking me with its careless beauty. The sea didn't know I was leaving broken. The palm trees swayed as though they were waving goodbye, but not to me, to the woman I used to be. I sat rigid, my suitcase beside me, my hands folded tightly in my lap. My reflection in the window looked like a stranger. Pale skin, swollen eyes,
lips pressed so hard together they were nearly bloodless. I had never looked so small. And yet, beneath that reflection, I saw something else. The ember. The faint, steady glow that had survived the fire. At the airport, the world assaulted me with life. Families bustled past, juggling children and carry-ons. Couples leaned into each other, laughing over shared coffees. Friends snapped photos, their voices bright with excitement. The sound of departure boards clicking overhead was a language of new beginnings for everyone but me. I moved through it like a ghost. Every glance at a pair of clasped hands, every stolen kiss felt like salt rubbed into raw wounds. Their love was loud, unashamed, thriving. Mine had ended in silence behind a curtain of gauzy fabric, destroyed in whispers and perfume. When I reached security, I hesitated. For the first time, the thought pierced me. This is it. I'm really leaving him behind. My throat tightened. Part of me expected him to appear, to stop me, to beg. But the only voice calling names was the airline attendant announcing boarding groups. On the plane, I pressed my forehead to the window as the ground fell away beneath me. The resort, the sea, the coastline blurred into blue and gold. I closed my eyes, but behind my lids was the lounge, the girl's laughter, his cowardly gaze. My nails dug into the armrest, anchoring me, reminding me that I was in motion now, moving away, not circling the same wound. The man next to me smiled politely, offered me a piece of gum. I thanked him with a voice so thin it barely existed. He didn't notice the storm in me, and I was glad. I didn't want to explain. I didn't want to share. Hours later, when the plane touched down, the cabin erupted with chatter. Phones switching on, people announcing their safe arrival to loved ones waiting at home. I sat in silence, my phone heavy in my hand. There was no one I wanted to call. I walked off the plane with nothing but my suitcase and the quiet promise pulsing inside me. This is not the end of me. This is the beginning.
The apartment was exactly as we had left it. Shoes by the door, a half-burned candle on the coffee table, 2 mugs in the sink. It should have felt like home, but it was unbearable. Every corner hummed with the ghost of him. The couch where he fell asleep with his laptop, the bookshelf with novels he'd promised to read but never touched, the framed photo of us smiling by the sea last summer. I stood in the doorway for a long time, suitcase still in my hand, the silence pressing down heavier than any sound. The air smelled faintly of him, of us, of everything I could no longer claim. My body wanted to collapse, to crawl into bed and drown in tears. But the ember inside me flared instead, small but steady. I set the suitcase down, pulled my phone from my bag, and scrolled through contacts with trembling fingers. Not friends, not family, him least of all. A number I hadn't dialed in years stopped me. Law office, Karpov and Associates. We had used them once, early in our marriage for some paperwork when buying the apartment. I had kept the number without thinking, tucked away in my phone, forgotten. Until now. My hand shook as I pressed the call button. The line rang, each tone echoing in my chest. When a calm voice answered, "Law office, how may we help you?" my throat tightened. For a second, I couldn't speak. Then the words came, raw but steady. I need to speak to someone about divorce. There it was, out in the world, irrevocable. The silence after felt like air rushing back into my lungs. The assistant transferred me to a lawyer, and I explained in fragments, my voice trembling but refusing to break. They spoke gently, professionally, guiding me through first steps. Dates, documents, the beginning of the end. When I hung up, my hands were still shaking, but it wasn't weakness. It was release.
I sank into the couch, the very couch that held so many of our evenings, and stared at the photo on the wall. Us on the beach, smiling, his arm around me. Slowly, deliberately, I stood, took it down, and set it face down on the table. The silence of the apartment was still there, heavy and suffocating, but it was no longer the silence of waiting. It was the silence of ending. And endings, I realized, are the first breath of beginnings. The next morning, I woke in a house that felt both familiar and alien. The sheets smelled faintly of him. The walls carried our laughter, but the air was heavy, hollow. For a moment, I lay still, staring at the ceiling, the urge to sink back into oblivion tugging at me. But then I remembered the phone call to the lawyer, the words I had spoken, words that could not be unsaid. I rose. My body felt heavy, as though every limb carried the weight of years. I padded barefoot into the bathroom, the tiles cold beneath me. The mirror above the sink reflected a stranger. Swollen eyes ringed with red, lips cracked, hair tangled from restless sleep. For a heartbeat, I wanted to look away, but I didn't. I leaned closer, gripping the sink until my knuckles whitened. My reflection held my stare. Yes, I was broken. Yes, I was exhausted. But beneath the wreckage, I saw something flickering, something fierce. This is me, I thought. Not the wife who kept rituals alive while he built a secret life. Not the woman waiting for him to come home. Not the shadow living in the glow of his smile. This. Just me. I touched my face, traced the lines of salt left by tears. Then, almost without thinking, I whispered to my reflection, "You're still here." The words cracked in my throat, but they echoed through me. I said them again, firmer this time. "You're still here." I opened the cabinet, pushed aside the cologne bottle he had left, and let it fall into the trash with a dull thud. One by one, I removed his toothbrush, his razor, the half-empty deodorant, each item a piece of him still haunting this space. The mirror watched me, and I didn't look away. When the counter was bare of him, only my things remained. Simple, modest, mine. I stared at that reflection again, at a woman who had endured betrayal and survived it. A woman who had spoken the word divorce and lived to breathe after. A woman who, though trembling, was standing. I lifted my phone and opened the camera. For the first time in days, I took a picture. Not smiling, not posing, just raw, honest. Proof that I existed beyond him. Proof that I was still here. The photo looked back at me, harsh and unpolished, but for once, I didn't hate it. For once, I believed it. It was a Saturday. The kind of Saturday we used to spend lazily. Coffee in bed, errands, maybe a walk through the park. But this Saturday was mine. The first one in years that belonged only to me. I woke earlier than usual, the sunlight spilling across the floorboards, soft and forgiving. For the first time since I'd returned, I didn't feel the heaviness pinning me to the bed. Instead, there was a strange lightness, tentative, fragile, like a bird testing its wings. I showered, washed the salt of tears from my skin, and dressed simply. Jeans, a soft blouse, nothing that asked for his approval. Just me. When I stepped outside, the city felt different. Not brighter, not kinder, but sharper, more alive. The sound of traffic, the chatter of people, The smell of fresh bread from the bakery on the corner, all of it reached me in ways it hadn't in weeks. I walked aimlessly at first, letting my feet choose the direction. My heart beat quickly, as though every step were an act of defiance. When I passed a flower stand, I stopped. Roses, tulips, lilies. Colors spilling in every direction. He had always been the one to bring me flowers, usually on anniversaries, sometimes after a fight. I had never bought them for myself. The thought felt both foreign and ridiculous, and yet I found myself reaching for a small bouquet of white lilies. The vendor wrapped them in brown paper, tied with twine. He asked, "For someone special?" He smiled casually as he said that. "Yes," I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. "For me." Carrying those flowers down the street felt like carrying a banner. People glanced, some smiled politely, but they had no idea of the battle I had just won. It wasn't about the lilies. It was about reclaiming the act itself. I stopped at a cafe I had never been to before, alone. I ordered a cappuccino and sat by the window, the bouquet resting on the table beside me. I opened a book, one I had abandoned months ago, and read, the words settling into me like old friends. At one point, I looked up and caught the gaze of a man at the next table. He was alone too, scribbling in a notebook. Our eyes met, and he offered a small smile. Not invasive, not flirtatious, just human. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I smiled back. It wasn't about him. It wasn't about anyone. It was about me, about the fact that I could, that I had enough left inside me to offer even the smallest gesture of warmth to the world. When I returned home, I placed the lilies in a vase on the kitchen table. The apartment still echoed with silence, but the sight of those flowers made it feel less like an ending and more like the fragile outline of a beginning. The ember inside me glowed brighter, small, but alive.
Some stories begin with love and end with betrayal, but every ending is a beginning too. If you want to hear more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button.